Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Hua. I am here to read part 6 of Dellanna. I hope that you have been enjoying this story. Today we are going to find out what is going to happen in this marvelous romantic comedy. Again, this story is written in shifting first-person point of view with the character's name written first and said first before the story begins. I hope that you enjoy yourself and please subscribe if you have not. Thank you.
Without love in your heart, without love by your side, without love playing part, tell me what you do, tell me what you do. Without love in your heart, without love.
Jason. So much for a good start. Dellanna not only witnessed a murder, but she was seen, and by none other than Bobby Ray's dirty handyman. Poor girl thought she was watching two men help a third drunk guy into a truck. She's been stuck inside a good world for so long that she didn't realize how bad the true world really was. If she was seen, this meant the protection had to be brought up a notch. What I didn't expect was the aunt visiting Dellanna's home the following day. She had an armful of roses and other fancy flowers that I had no way of telling the difference between. She had a key and let herself in. It was only after the aunt left that I noticed a black SUV tailgating not too far from her. Shit, someone was watching her already. I turned around to find Dellanna sitting on the couch wearing one of my button-down shirts and a pair of black shorts. She looked good enough to eat, but at the moment, it had to be pushed aside. When she caught my gaze, her eyes flickered an unreadable expression, and I shoved my hands through my hair. Someone followed your aunt to your house, I said. As I thought she would, she stood up and her face drained of color. I went to her and pulled her into my arms, comforting her, but I could feel her body shaking. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I was supposed to be a good helper, and yet I've done nothing but make this worse." I pulled away from her. "Tell me, if you were to see those two guys again, would you recognize them?" "Yeah, I would. I mean, it was dark, but there was still enough light around that I could make out the faces." "Okay. You're my main witness. I have a book of mugshots I want you to look at, but it's over at my office. Bobby Ray and the other two men have seen what you looked like, so we'll need to disguise you. After we figure out who those two men are, you and I are going to have to break this news to your aunt. She needs to be aware of what's going on, especially when someone is hightailing her." "Oh, she's not going to like this." "I don't care about that. All I care about is your safety."
When I think about the way we used to be, when I think about the things you took from me, I know that I am so much better. When I look at what I've done, now that we're apart, when I look at what I've won.
The book of mugshots was sitting on my desk when Dellanna and I arrived in my office. I hadn't been in here for a few days, and I opened the windows to let in some air. As she sat down, I pushed the book toward her. She opened it up and began looking from one mugshot to another. I walked out to get us some coffee when my boss, Chief George Allen, walked by with a 2-day beard and a cup of coffee. George was by far the greatest guy on earth, but he had a tendency to walk in zones that weren't really welcoming him. Like right now, he was staring at my girl pretty hard, and she was wearing a black baseball cap and an oversized t-shirt of mine with jeans. "Who's broad?" he asked. "An eyewitness for the Bobby Ray case I'm working on," I replied. "Shit, really? Finally making a break, huh?" "Finally, yeah. Now take your eyes off of her and onto something else." George laughed and walked away as I made my way back into my office. I set the cups down and closed the door, just as she pointed to two men on the open book. "It's these two." I smiled. "You're right. It is those two. She gazed up at me with questioning. Wait, you already knew? Why did you make me do this then? Honey, I needed to make sure your eyes didn't lie to you. I already know who those two men are, but I had to make sure who you saw and who I think you might have saw were the same. You see, I've been trying to nail these guys for the past 6 years. I know their every move, yet I can't land a single piece of evidence on them. But now, I think I may have just made a big break. She rubbed her neck. But what if the judges use the night vision to go against us? Which is why, even though you're a witness, I still have to send you back in to talk to Bobby Ray. He liked you, so he'll be sure to have you taken care of by his own hands. She shuddered. I bent down and touched her arm. Don't worry, Della. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. How do you break the news to an aunt who took care of a niece because her own sister died, that her only niece is now under witness protection? I knew she hated Connor for what happened with Sheila, and now I was afraid she was going to hate me too. We waited until the shop's closed sign turned on before Della and I headed in from the back door and locked it. I could hear soft music playing, and I followed her as she led me to the front where her aunt was busy putting some flowers away. Aunt Kate? Dellanna asked. Her aunt shifted around, and the flowers dropped from her hands. When I appeared from the darkened corner, her eyes glared with confusion, and then hate. Della turned to me, and I could tell she was at a loss of words. I walked to stand beside her and gently put my arms around her. I don't think I've officially introduced myself. I'm Jason, Connor's brother. What are you two doing here? I thought you took her to Bali. I shook my head. No, we have a lot to catch up on. If looks could kill, her Aunt Kate would get an Oscar award for it. In my many years as a cop, I'd never sweat in my boots before, even when interrogating some of the world's worst killers. And yet, here I was, sweating like bullets when her aunt was giving me the glare that nearly took out my heart. First, she'd taken Della away from me and had me stand at the back door while she kept Della by her side. Every word I had to say to defend myself, she cut me off without a care in the world. She spoke right over me and didn't give a damn if what I had to say mattered or not. And right as I watched Della stand behind her aunt, looking like a frightened child, something happened to me that I never expected. I fell in love with her. She was still in disguise, and yet that didn't hide what I knew was beneath everything about her. Her green eyes were filled with concern for me, and throughout this whole time, her aunt was yelling at me for putting her niece's life in danger. And here was the girl, all worried about me. And guess what I ended up doing? I ended up on bended knee, in front of her aunt, in front of the girl who stole my heart. And the aunt finally shut up. Dellanna. Oh my God. Jason was down on one knee and my heart slammed against my ribcage. My Aunt Kate, who had been chewing his ears off for the last few minutes, went quiet as a church mouse, and you could hear a pin drop in the flower shop. He looked up at me with those dark eyes that melted my soul and made my toes curl, and then his eyes shifted to my aunt. And the words he said captured the fiber of my being. I'm a shitty man, Aunt Kate. I know that. In the beginning, I sought out to sleep with your niece to satisfy this hunger of mine. I'd been watching her for the past 6 years, and I thought to myself, what a fine woman she was. Whoever was lucky enough to have her in his life struck gold. But the more I watched her, the more I realized no one was lucky enough yet. And so I sought out to be the lucky one, and she accepted me. I'll admit it, I wanted her for myself. But I never expected any of this to happen. Seriously, I had this brilliant plan in my mind, and it backfired. And like I told Della, things always go sour. But here I am, on my knee, asking you to let me protect her. And to do so, I will marry her and make her mine. I'll do that because I love her. I blinked, and Aunt Kate reached behind her to grab my hand. She turned around to face me and looked at me with questioning eyes. I didn't know how to answer, and then I watched as Jason slowly stood up and walked toward us. He gently pushed Aunt Kate to the side and took a hold of my hands together. I'm sorry. This is not what I had in mind when revealing how I felt, but it just hit me right now while watching your aunt protect you. She was fending for you because she loved you, and I wanted so much to be the one to protect you. Aunt Kate pulled him toward her. You're telling me you've been in love with her, and you just told her now? Jason nodded. Boy, for a handsome man, you got shit for brains. You should have told me that first, and I'd save my breath on the lecture. God damn you, boy, you made me lose brain cells. He smiled. I'm sorry. She turned to me. Sweetheart, can I talk to you for a moment? Without the brainless god? I laughed and patted Jason's hand as I followed her to the break room in the back of the store. When we got there, she turned around and threw her arms around me. I could feel her body shaking, and I realized she was crying. I wrapped her in my arms and held her as she cried her heart out to me. When she was done, she pulled away and cupped my face. Don't you ever lie to me again. Do you hear? Hearing what Jason just told me scared the living shit out of me. I'm so sorry, Aunt Kate. Jason thought it was for the best. For a cop, he's not that smart, you know? Aside from that, he loves you. How do you feel for him? I shrugged. I don't know if I love him yet, but I do strongly like him. He's great in bed, and he can make a mean cup of coffee. Sounds like a winner there already. Look, I just want to make sure you're not being forced into anything your heart doesn't want. I guess in a way this is me acting as a mother to you and not wanting to see you crying your heart out should he break it like that asshole did a while back. Jason is nothing like him, and if anything, Rick doesn't hold a stick to him. The phrase is hold a candle to him. I rolled my eyes. Whatever. Aunt Kate laughed and threw her arms around me one more time. When we walked back out, Jason was leaning against the counter and his arms were crossed, which made him look really intimidating. Aunt Kate walked me to him, and then she took a deep breath. If you break her heart, I'll break your balls. Thanks, Aunt Kate, Jason said with a smirk. I never expected my life to be this way. I thought I'd die a spinster, and after hearing Jason reveal how much he loved me and that he wanted me not only in his bed, but in his life as his wife, my heart kept jumping at the sight of him. I never felt this way with Rick, and the more I looked at him, the more I kept smiling. I had to be extra careful now since I had been caught in the open. There were men after me, and after Jason explained about how to make sure I kept my tracks covered, I determined that I would never in my life want to be an undercover agent ever again. I don't know how you do this kind of job, I said as I sat curled up next to him on the couch. The pizza box was empty before us, and the music was low in the background. The TV was on, but muted. I felt like I gained 20 pounds since I met him because he was feeding me too good. He ran a hand through my hair, and I turned to look at him. It gets easier with time. But it doesn't mean I like it when I have to tell a parent that their child is found dead, overdosed with meth. I reached over and hugged him as his pager went off. He gave me a quick kiss as he stood up to go make a phone call. A knock came on the door, and I got up to open. As I pulled open the door, the person I saw standing before me had me gasping so loud, but my shock was cut short when a gun fired where Jason was standing, and I was knocked out cold. Connor. Jason was grunting as he woke from his surgery, and I was sweating bullets of fear and hate. Thank goodness for midnight Chinese cravings, because if it hadn't been for my stomach bawling for those wontons, I'd never make the drive out to that little shop by Jason's place. I decided to stop in and see if they wanted to join me when I saw police sirens and lights blaring. Jason had been shot and Dellanna was missing. My brother was spitting fire as he sat up. Did anyone get a good look at who took her? He asked through gritted teeth. Look, can you focus on getting better? You can't help her in the situation you're in, I said. He gave me a glare. I hate that this is turning out to be this way. It seems Della is paying for the mistakes I keep missing. And then his face turned sour, and I followed his gaze. Aunt Kate was marching into the hospital floor, and her eyes were crying out for bloody murder. Oh, shit, Jason muttered. Where is she? Aunt Kate yelled. Not 24 hours after you proposed to my niece, and she's all over the news that she's missing. What kind of husband are you going to be? I almost choked and turned to look at my brother. Propose? Since when? Both of them ignored me completely. Where is she? Jason sighed. If I knew, I'd be there already. Hey, I said, and she finally turned to me. My brother has just been shot. Why don't you pipe down a bit, okay? Oh, I'm so sorry about your brother, but my niece, who he just proposed to, is missing. Should I dance and clap my hands while he thinks about what to do? Stop it, Jason cried. I've been wrecking my brain, even during his surgery while I was out, about what to do. I'm sorry this is happening, but to find her means we gotta put our differences aside and work together. Blaming me won't solve the problem, and pointing fingers at you won't bring her home either. So let's just stop and figure out what we need to do in a more friendly manner. Not only for my headache right now, but also for my sanity. Finally, the aunt shut up. Jason rubbed his forehead and took a deep breath. I need to know, Aunt Kate, is there anyone who may know where she lives besides 3 of us and the people who have been following you? She thought long and hard, and then she looked up with bright eyes. Rick. Rick? Her asshole fiancé who left her at the altar, Rick? I asked. Yes. She dug out her phone and swiped a few times, and then she turned the phone to us. This is Rick. Jason took the phone and stared long and hard, and when he slowly lowered the phone, he swore loudly. What? Aunt Kate asked. Jason shut his eyes, and then when he opened them, a dark mist was formed in his irises. Rick is Bobby Ray's younger brother. Thank you so much for joining me for part 6. Tune in for part 7.